Hi, Redshirt here. Today I'd like to talk about communism, which I call communityism. You can find out about it, by the way, by reading the Communist Manifesto written in 1848 by Marx and Engels. They're the ones that actually invented the term, so it's well worth it to read it. You can get it from Pathfinder Press, or it's probably in all of the libraries. So communityism, that's right, communism. Communityism, communism, does not exist today, just like socialism does not exist, although in the past, communism did exist. In a communist system, if you can call it a system, there's no government. Imagine that. There's no laws. There's no bosses. There's nobody telling anybody what to do. There's nobody that has more rights over anybody else. It's egalitarian. One's behavior is governed by custom, not laws and policemen and jails and all of that. Communism, the people who live in communism are we people. They're not me people. We live in class society right now. We are me people. We will have to make that change to we people. So let me tell you, communism is not a country. Okay, there's no such thing as a communist country. This phrase is uttered by people who are ignorant and usually arrogant and refuse to understand what communism is. You know, most politicians in the world and most political parties who call themselves communists are not communists. In fact, they're something quite else. So, for example, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union was not communist. And the Communist Party of China today is not a communist party. They abandoned Marx a long time ago. Maoism, for example, has nothing to do with Marx. But, you know, they took on the mantle of Marxism and dragged it through the mud. If you call yourself the Pope, and your friends call you the Pope, and your enemies call you the Pope, does that make you the Pope? No, it does not. There are two types of communism that we're going to talk about today: primitive communism and advanced communism. Advanced communism is in our future, hopefully. This is what socialist revolution prepares us for. But let's talk about primitive communism. That's extremely interesting. You can find out more about primitive communism in a book called The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State, written by Friedrich Engels. And you can also find that at Pathfinder Press or in libraries. So, you know, for 300,000 years, the human race has been around. And for most of that time, our ancestors lived in primitive communism. That's right, 300,000 years. It's a long time, isn't it? And only the last 10,000 years have we not been living in primitive communism. We've been living in class society. Yeah, all of that wonderful communist living ended with class society 10,000 years ago, when the agricultural revolution took over. Accumulated wealth. It's very important to understand that money 10,000 years ago was really just food. Or we could say food, stored food, was wealth. And that's when we started the bosses and the toilers separation. That's class society. The bosses owned the wheat and the legumes and put them in granaries. See, they store well. Right? Grains and wheat and legumes store well, whereas vegetables, fruits, meats, they don't store very well. So our forager hunters who lived for 300,000 years in primitive communism, they went to work every day, but they brought back to their clan perishable food. They were also nomads, so they would travel with vegetation changes, the herd, the animals change. They would travel with those. And you can't carry around granaries. You can't carry around stored food, a lot of stored food, only a little bit. So you can only carry what you can bring on your backs, right? So now back then, for 300,000 years, our forager-hunter communist ancestors lived in matrilineal clans, egalitarian, no giant separation between men and women, for example. Everybody wore the same clothes. People did pretty much the same activities. Women could hunt. Men could take care of kids. Of course, women can have children and breastfeed. That was just about the only real difference. Clans of 30 people traveling, settling in some places for a while, and then picking up and traveling again. Their whole object in life was to collect food and feast at night. So they collect food during the day, in the morning. In the afternoon, they probably goof off and do little handicrafts. Nobody telling them what to do. And then at night, feast and party and have a good time. Of course, that's what's natural for us. There was no pair bonding, by the way. There was no soulmate. The idea of the soulmate was all class society to separate men from women and disempower women. There was no concept of fatherhood either. Fathers lived with their mothers' clans. They didn't move in with their females. Okay. And in fact, my belief is that our matrilineal communist clans met at certain specified meetup locations once a month during the full moon for full moon orgies, where they would exchange genes and culture and stories and fun and make friends. This would last for 3 or 4 nights of moonlight. See, during the full moon, there's light, and you can party at night without carrying around a torch all the time. So clans used to meet and have these parties, these full moon orgies. And you know, back then, there was no sex shame, there was no body shame, and there was no repressed emotions either. You know, why do I come up with this? Well, you know, humans are the only species of animals that menstruate, that is, that have a menstrual cycle every month. Most animals do it once or twice a year. But humans do it every month, and this is so that we can socialize, because we're extremely sociable, so that we would have meetups every month. You know, there was no wealth. There were no wealthy people. I mean, there was no wealth. You went out, you got your food, you brought it back. In the afternoon, you made bone whistles, shell necklaces, clothing from skin. Well, anybody can do that. All they had to work with was stones. For 300,000 years, all they had to work with was stones. So he didn't have any real wealth. Here, you want a necklace? Here, you can have it. I'll make another. Yay. Okay. That's very primitive technology. It's not a utopia, so don't start calling it a utopia. They had a lot of problems back then. There was no protection against catastrophes, for example. They had no granaries to protect them against famine or drought, no way to protect against floods or volcanoes or disease. They couldn't prolong their lives very long. So yeah, not a utopia, but certainly primitive communist existence. If you want to know more about how people like that really lived, I would recommend a book called The Forest People by Clive Turnbull, an anthropologist who wrote, studied the people of the Ituri rainforest in the Congo. The Forest People really gives you an idea of what people are like who do not repress their emotions and do not repress their sexuality and who live egalitarian lives. It's pretty eye-opening. And then he wrote another book called The Mountain People. This is about people, farming people, who suddenly have drought, well, over a period of years, and everything falls apart, and it's really, really nasty. So that's the whole purpose of farming and granaries. And wealth is to prevent a catastrophe. Right? So when people talk about human nature, I always have to smile, because they're only talking about the last 10,000 years. Now, anthropologists and biologists do not think that our genes change all that much in 10,000 years. They may a little bit, but not a whole lot. We are not class society people. We are fish out of water. We are primitive communists who lived for 300,000 years in this state. So that's really 30 to 1. If you're going to base your idea of human nature on 1 and ignore the 30, what kind of sense does that make? So, class society, as I've explained in the previous segment, is like a gear shift. It's like shifting gears from second to third. It's disruptive, but it's only 10,000 years. It's not a very long time, and we're at the end of it. We're at the very end of it. So, that's what a socialist revolution will prepare us for, to return to communism. Only this time, it will be a very advanced communism. We will be living, in my opinion, in high-tech villages. And we're not going to go back to the Stone Age. That's finished. We will have high-tech villages, highly technical, highly advanced automation, artificial intelligence, molecular engineering, biological engineering, with advanced communication and transportation, voluntary communities spread out all over the globe. And all scarcities of material goods and services will be abolished because there won't any longer be any need to hold on to wealth. So, when you make everything available, nothing is worth anything. And that's where we're headed. Stuff will become valueless. In fact, at some point, probably in the 30s, there will be molecular assemblers where you will talk to a machine and say, I want red shirt number 3. And the machine will put together a bunch of molecules in a reservoir for your red shirt number 3. And bing, there it is. You wear your red shirt number 3 for the day, and then you put it back in the hopper. The molecular assembler disassembles it into basic molecules again. Ready for the next request. I mean, this kind of thing is all in a book called The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil. I recommend it. So, the pace of change is increasing as well. Evolution is speeding up. So don't say, oh, this will happen in 100 years. No, it's going to happen pretty soon because everything is speeding up. If you notice, change is increasing. The changes are getting bigger and bigger. And that's the way it's going to be from here on out. So we have to get used to change. We have to get used to growth. So, we have 2 choices coming up. We can either create a socialist revolution and head towards advanced communism, or we can fail in that endeavor, in which case a fascist counter-revolution, World War III, and nuclear winter will be the end of humanity. So we're coming to a fork in the road at some point, and we're going to have to make it happen. Anyway, that is communism. That's my take on it. I'm a proud communist fighting for a better future for humanity. This is Red Shirt saying, read the militant. Contact me at buildtheunions@gmail.com. If you need to say anything, discuss anything, request anything, ball me out for anything. Red Shirt saying, until next time, keep fighting.